I'm always surprised when technology works.
It's true.
So you guys, some of you guys may want to move over here because I think I'm going to home base at the computer, right? And so instead, it's really good because I'll get my steps in, right? And apparently you're supposed to have 10,000, so 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is great. This is 10. So if I go back and forth like 500 times, that'll be like 10,000 steps, and I'll be set.
There you go. That's all you need.
It's just a solid math.
All right. I think we're going to get going. I know there's going to be some stragglers coming in and out, but I just want to take time and thank all of you for coming. My name is Dean Kovacs. I'm the Director of School Engagement for Smart Families, and I'll talk more about that later. We're going to get to the main reason why we're here tonight. So I want to welcome and thank Principal Carolina just to bring in my attention Dr. Brian Goonan, who's earned his his Doctor of Philosophy in Clinical Psychology from Emory University in 1994. He began his private practice in Houston, Texas in 1995. Since then, he's provided individual, group, and family therapy within an outpatient environment. He has consulted to schools and organizations. Dr. Goonan focuses on individual development across the lifespan in the context of relationships in order to address the various areas in which this development takes place. He works in a variety of locations and modalities, ranging from therapy office visits to school and home observations and interventions, to executive coaching, to sports psychology. Each of these areas is chosen based on the client's presenting concerns and needs. And so, without further ado, just give a round of applause for Dr. Brian.
Probably not.
All right.
Can everybody hear me? Yeah? Okay. If not, just wave your hands like, and that also counts as aerobic. I don't know if you know this, but these count as steps, right? Or whatever it is. It was really, really weird. I was on the plane and I'm looking over and I'm saying, oh, she must have some sort of condition because I see this woman doing this, right? And I'm thinking, wow, she must, maybe it's early Parkinson's or something, right? And then I'm watching her do this. She's doing it over here. I'm watching her do this, right? And then she does this. I'm like, oh, you're cheating. You're doing steps with your wrist. That's not the same. It defeats the entire purpose. Really? Anyway, but we do our best. Fun observations. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. We're going to try to go through for the folks that are younger than say like 18. You probably don't want to be here for this because you're not going to like what I have to say, and I understand that. I get that. But it is what it is. Here we go. Oh, where's Waldo? Yeah, we're doing Where's Waldo. So you see all this? I was told you should start with something kind of interesting and different and exciting, sometimes a joke. I already told my joke about the lady, so, so I could have probably just done away with this, but I'm not gonna, because it's kind of fun. So can you guys find him?
Yes.
Does anybody see him?
On the postage stamp.
Yeah, on the postage stamp. It's like the algebra problems where it says find X and the kid goes, I get it. Well, that's okay, but you've got young eyes, so you should be able to see him. But we'll go ahead and do this. Like this. Waldo finds himself. There we go. All right. So, we're here talking about cell phones. Cell phones and self-systems or identity development, and that's kind of my jam. That's what I like doing. It's like, how do you become the you that you are, right, across the lifespan? And cell phones came into our lives, and they really did some bizarro things to that whole self-development. And hopefully, I'll be able to explain kind of what that is and what we can do to fix it. Because sometimes we have Pandora's box. Everybody's familiar with that mythology, right? Sometimes we have Pandora's box, and we just can't put it back in there. But we can kind of contain it a little bit, and that's what we're going to try to talk about. So let's talk about cell phones, right? Once upon a time, cell phones were these things that you carried in a suitcase because that's how you charged them. And they were about this big. It took almost 2 hands to hold on to one. And very few people had them because very few people needed them. Okay? You know, those people were apparently really important, and when cell phones first came out, we also used a different word for them. Anybody have any idea what that word was?
Car phone?
No, the people. Pretentious. We just thought they were pretentious. They're carrying around a suitcase because they're so important that they can't be out of contact for even 5 minutes. Somebody has got to be able to get hold of them wherever they are, whenever they're needed. So, yes. But lo and behold, we started thinking, oh, but it is really important for safety reasons, right? Now, the safety reasons, I usually track safety reasons back to, remember X-raying candy? Right? So we X-rayed candy because, well, in Utah, they X-rayed candy because they were trying to outlaw trick-or-treating. And so the more they could create some sort of, oh no, this is going to be really bad, maybe you'll get poisoned. By the way, if you X-ray candy, you can't determine if there's poison in there, but that's okay. That's irrelevant. Because we're going to X-ray it to see if it's poison. And poof, there you go. What happens? We see a dramatic increase in around 1982. That was that Tylenol thing. In Chicago, somebody decided that they would put some cyanide in Tylenol because they were mad for some reason. 7 people died, and before you know it, X-raying Halloween candy is what we do. Well, there's a guy who tracks this, Joel Best, right, from the University of Delaware, and this we're going to poison, stick needles, razors, etc. in Halloween candy is called Halloween sadism. That's its name. There are 0 incidents of this actually occurring. Okay? He started tracking this in 1985 and went backwards. You can see to 1970, 0 incidents. Every time there was some sort of Halloween candy thing, it was explained by something else. And yet, we still do it. Okay? 2011, it's a really long time, 2011, right? Let's see, 24% of parents of children 12 and under are still concerned about poison trees, 1 in 4. Still concerned. 0 incidents, still concerned. 15% are worried about abductions, okay? And that brings us to cell phones. I think that was really one of the first things that happened with cell phones. I have to get my kid a cell phone because what if they become abducted, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. This was the concern, that the child could be abducted, but if they had a cell phone, it would somehow or another create some safety. Maybe they could hide it someplace, the abductor wouldn't figure out they had it, they could sneak away at some point, make a call, get somebody there, that was it. Well, how many people are abducted? We look at the Child Watch 2015. There are 797,500 kids who are missing. Family abductions account for, as you can see, a very large portion of that. This is the non-custodial parent, typically, who's unhappy with the current custody arrangement, and poof, abduction happens. Okay? The kidnapping thing that everybody, they'll be walking down the street, and if they don't have their cell phone, this is what puts them in danger. 115 stereotypical kidnappings. That is not to make light of the fact that if your child is one of the 115 kids, that is super upsetting, okay? And I'm not making light of that in any way, shape, or form. But when you think about statistically, 115, okay? Out of, I'll show you the statistics later, okay? Like 100 million. That's really, really small. Does that make sense? Okay? Non-family abductions, we're going to visit this in just a second, 58,005. The rest are runaway and throwaways, right? So basically, somebody really is doing a horrible job taking care of their kid, and they just kind of they leave their kid at somebody's house and report the kid as a runaway, so that they don't get reported to the constable for not taking care of what they need to take care of. Or the child just runs away. I don't have the statistics there, but like 99% of the kids who run away come back inside of 4 days. And a runaway is an overnight sleepover. Anytime they're gone for at least a night, that's a runaway. So let's talk about the abductions. Non-family abductions. Again, 58,500. 1 in 7 youths that are online receive a sexual solicitation or approach over the internet. 4% receive an aggressive sexual solicitation. Asked to meet someplace, call them on the phone, send them off on mail, money, gifts. 4%. Okay? I can't really go backward. Does anybody remember the number of missing children?
787.
It's like 797,500 approximately, if I'm remembering that right. Okay? So 4% of kids who are online, but I mean really, how many kids could that possibly be? By the age of 18, 93% of all kids have smartphones. They are online. Right? And just because I'm a math geek, 4% of 93, right? But that's not exactly how statistics works. So I went ahead and I shifted it down. 2021 stats, because that's what that chart says, right? 33 million kids between the ages of 8 and 15 years old. 57%, which is the average of the 8 to 15 years old, is 19.26 million. 4% of that, remember the ones who have aggressive sexual solicitations, 4% of that is 770,000. How many kids go missing in their runaway and parent abductions? How many kids? Right? That almost gets to that number. You might as well just count them as missing kids. It's about the same. That makes sense? So if we're talking about safety, is this really making them more safe? It's 115 kids you're talking about versus 770,000. I don't know. It's hard to make the safety argument. Okay. Well, okay, let's make sure they get it when they're driving so that they can be safe when they're driving. Okay, so in the event that something happens, we want to make sure they're safe. In 2020, 7% of drivers between the ages of 15 and 20 were involved in fatal crashes because of distracted driving. The number one thing that distracts them? This. All right? In 2019, 39% of high schoolers reported that they are texting or emailing while driving when asked on. How many drivers do you think we have? What's 39% of that? Do you think we're exceeding 115 at this point? Do you think we're exceeding even 58,500? Probably. And 7% of those kids are in fatal crashes. Do you think we're safe? Is this really creating safety? What's your argument? I need some argument for safety. Somebody want to make it? Really hard to argue about safety. All right. Well, it's convenience. Right? I like the convenience of the kid having a phone because if I have to contact my child. Well, the question is, where are they? Where's your 10 or 12-year-old kid that has a cell phone? Well, maybe they're at school. You could call the school. Maybe they're at practice. You could call the coach. Maybe they're at a friend's house. Well, you could probably call the friend's parents. Do you need to call your kid? You can't call some adult where they are. Does that make any sense? Well, what if I'm running late? Well, how late are you running? A couple of minutes. Okay, how many people here grew up in like pre-1990? Parents ever run late? How many of you were abducted when that happened? Right? I mean, it happened all the time. Right? Sometimes parents just kind of just flat out forget. Coach would kind of hung around, you get upset, but it's not like people were like, well, I'm sure your mom will be around sometime, I'm leaving, bye-bye, right? Typically, there was some sort of adult that was there where you were. and they were perfectly fine to wait around until your parent got out. If you are running really that late, now remember we're adults, we do have cell phones. Theoretically, you would pull over. I did, I got lost tonight. And I was like, okay, pull over. Hey, drop me a pin. I have no idea where I'm going. Guess where I went? Chapwood. Oops. Right? It was the other sometimes. Anyway, so what if I'm running late? How late? Here's the question. Just call the adult that they're with. Call some other responsible adult. Somebody can probably take care of that. What is your kid going to do? Right? It's not like the other adults just going to leave them. Got it? Well, maybe they're at the mall, or park, or someplace like that, and they're just by themselves and there's no responsible adult around. How many of you are letting your 10-year-old wander around without any kind of accompaniment at the mall or the park? I mean, we don't even let our kids ride bikes down the street, right? So the odds of them, I'm running late, and there's someplace where I drop them off, and there's definitive danger wherever they are, because I left them completely by themselves. What do you think? What are the odds? High? Everybody in favor of high odds? Everybody in favor of low odds? Low odds. Okay. Well, what if they're in their room and I need to talk to them? It's my favorite, because that's really convenient, because, you know. There it is. Parenting with love and logic, we love to turn our preferences into a problem, right? If I want you to wear your coat, you don't want to wear your coat, but then you'll be sick, and then I'll have to take you to the doctor, and I'll have to miss work. You know, I mean, we really love making our preferences into their problem. All right. Uh-oh, I think I went too forward. I did. I'm going to go backward. Uh-oh. Did it disappear? It did disappear. I'm so upset. Okay, I'm going to do the last one. I'm just going to have to do this. One kind of stand-up style. The last case for cell phones is one that I can't necessarily deny, and that's community. Right? Do you remember the super long cord that used to go from the kitchen all the way down the hall and into your bedroom? The 50-foot cord that always got tangled and twisted, right? Why did we do that? Do you remember the phones that had the cradle and you're like, where is it? Beep, 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 beep. And you'd be trying to find the phone because it was the hands-free, the cordless, right? What you're talking about is community. Right? That kids need this sense of community. That they move from, and this is where we do this. Okay? That in order to develop across the lifespan, okay, they go through a phase called separation and individuation. That's Eric Erickson. Eric with a K because I messed that up. Anyway, that our peers provide a sense of community and belonging that is outside the family, and that's really important. Okay, it's important development, right? Sullivan, my favorite guy, always talks about the self is comprised of the reflected appraisals of significant others. Okay, the self, who I am, is really just a collection of the reflected appraisals of significant others. What people tell me about me. Starts with your family. Family goes to, or starts with your parents, goes to your family, moves to peers, and then we add significant others, romantic significant others, when the time becomes appropriate, okay? But we need this feedback because it's kind of like our GPS system to see if we're going in the right direction and where we are right now. So we talked about two needs. We talked about the need for safety. We talked about the need for security, okay? The need for safety is basically, do I have food in my tummy? Do I have clothes on my back? Do I got a roof over my head? Am I going to get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger? That's safety, right? Am I going to be alive for the foreseeable future? Okay? We almost never worry about that. But security is something that we worry about. And security is 4 questions. right? Or 4 things we want to know. Am I competent? Okay. Am I loved? Am I lovable? And do I belong? And loved and lovable are 2 different things. Okay? How many people have kids? Okay. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard this before. Something to the effect of, you have to say that you're my mom. Right? Or you have to say that you're my dad. What that means is there's like this kind of loose obligation for you to be dishonest with me and tell me things that make me feel good. And that is right around the age that they start turning to peers. And it matters less and less what you're saying to them and more what their peers are saying. And that is an expansion of the self system, and it is very developmentally appropriate and needed. And this, if there was any argument for cell phones, if there was any argument at all, okay, would be a reasonably solid argument. Okay? Unfortunately, with security needs come insecurity. Because what happens when you turn to your peers and you don't get the messages you want to get? That's when you become insecure. What's getting a lot of play right now, attachment theory, right? So anybody, emotion-focused therapy, it's attachment theory, like somebody, it's like, ooh, the wheel, right? We know the wheel exists, right? So that's okay. Attachment theory's been out there for a really long time, but somebody grabbed that old wine, put it in a new bottle, and poof, now we're all excited about it, okay? And when you look at insecure attachments, there it is. We used to think that it was set in early childhood. That's Mary Ainsworth, Bowlby, Thomas Bowlby. We used to think that it was set in childhood, but we now know that it changes. It changes with interactions. Okay? It changes with the nature of our interactions, what we learn from interacting with others. Okay? And we know this is true because nobody would have ever dressed like that. Ever. What your peers think of you matters. That is not a normal outfit, unless everybody thinks it is. And then we put that outfit on. Okay. So what do we do in the self system? I told you, somewhere around 11, 12-ish is when it starts kicking in. What do my peers think of me? Right? We go to middle school, and middle school, quite honestly, is just a black hole of social grace. Okay? That's really all it is. If you've got a kid who's got any sort of difficulties or struggles and you could keep them from going to middle school, do that. Okay? Because that is where they are most likely going to take the biggest hit. Okay? They are just vicious little things, okay, in there. And they lie like nobody's business, and their parents, love their parents. My little Jimmy would never say that. Because it's their little Jimmy, right? And they're still thinking about their kid like a 5, 6, 7-year-old kid. Except now, that kid's like a 12-year-old little terror, okay? But it's still my 5-year-old. By the time the kid gets to be 14, 15, they're like, oh yeah, I know. We don't know what to do with them now, right? That's when they get to high school. But in middle school, it's a black hole of social risk. In high school, we start getting this clicking up. Okay, and which clique you're in is really important. For those of you that know this movie, 10 Things I Hate About You, they do a great job of going, that's that clique, that's that clique, that's that clique, that's that clique, and it is pretty accurate. Varies a little bit from school to school with the whole clicking thing. Super what happens, okay? And for anybody that knows this, because pop psychology is so much fun, Enneagrams, right? What's your number? Oh, I know. Everybody wants, by the way, everybody wants to be a 9. Everybody's like, I'm a 9. Yep, I'm a 9. Every once in a while, people will pride themselves in being kind of like 8s, 7s, because they're like jockey. Those are the popular kids. Yeah, that's what that is. And all of that is about, and even in adulthood, we want to know, what's my identity? I'm a 3. I'm a 5. I'm an INTJ. I'm an EFRBC. Whatever that is. We want to know. All those personality tests are really all about, tell me who I am. And we're like, oh yeah, that's so me. That's that reflected appraisal, right? When you take one of those personality tests, people are like, oh, I don't think that's accurate, because they can't see themselves that way, right? The fun thing to do with personality tests when you really get a chance to do it, right, is you go ahead and you get the person to fill it out, and then you get like a friend or a spouse to fill it out, and you compare the two, right? And you're like, yeah, I don't think you are who you think you are, because your friends don't think you are. It's very interesting to do. So here was the thing. Once upon a time, kids went to middle school, they went to the black hole of social grace, okay? And then they came home, right? They went to high school, and they floated around in their semi-dog-eat-dog, lifeboats, making sure they didn't crash into any of the other lifeboats, and then they came home, okay? And home was our nice little oasis in the middle of the desert. We didn't have to deal with the black hole. We didn't have to deal with the clicks. We knew what it was. And we would reach out and we would pick up the phone and drag it down the hallway and into our room with that long cord. But it wasn't 24/7. We got a break. And we got to touch base so that when our peers said all of these things that live in cyberbullying and all these bullying programs that we have, we came home and we didn't have to deal with it. We got to recenter ourselves. That doesn't happen anymore. So here's the case against self. I'm not going to redo what other people have already done. Really good book called Stolen Focus. Rohan Hari, I think. Hari's his last name. I think Rohan is his name. Really talks about that it steals our ability to be at peace, to be quiet, to rest, to relax, to take a step back and recenter ourselves. Talks about lots and lots of other things, our diet, our environment, the atmosphere, things like that, but is really, really clear about what winds up happening with when we have this constant bombardment from technology. Jensen, okay, writes about the teenage brain. She's a neurologist, I think at like Yale or Harvard or one of those, big roller places. We talked about two different things. The nucleus accumbens, which is part of the brain, right, is our anticipatory dopamines. So when we are excited for something to happen, right, when you're waiting to hear back about the job, right, when you're waiting to get that text, right, the nucleus accumbens kicks in. When you're sitting there and you walk into the casino, you're like, all right, right? That's what happens. You have this anticipatory excitement that occurs, right? And that happens in the nucleus accumbens. Now, whether or not we're going to do anything with that anticipation is kind of regulated by our prefrontal cortex, which basically says, hey, is this a good idea? The problem is that develops second, and we will follow our anticipatory excitement because it produces dopamine, and if it produces dopamine, we do it. As a general rule, if it produces dopamine, we do it, unless the prefrontal cortex says no. Okay? And in adolescence, the nucleus accumbens, the part that says, hey, that would be really, really fun, is way more developed than the part that goes, but maybe we shouldn't do that, right? So guess what happens? When adolescents act reckless, it's because they don't have enough prefrontal cortex to not act reckless. Does that make sense? Okay. And you guys do it. How many people? That phone buzzes. How many people have Apple Watches? I'm sitting here playing tennis the other day, right? And I'm back there playing doubles. My partner's up there, and I see him go. And I'm like, you're checking the time? What's going on? No, that's my wife. She was texting me. And I'm like, we're kind of in the middle of something here. Like, do you need to return that? What's going on here, buddy? Right? But I can't ignore it. I can't ignore it. I mean, what was that? What are the odds? I was like, oh no, is she pregnant? Is she going into labor? Like, that would make sense. That would be something to track. Right? Oh no, we just have a child. She needs milk. I'm like, oh, well, good. I'm glad we interrupted our game time, right? But that's what we do. We cannot deny it. When that thing goes off, when this thing goes off, our desire to pick it up and look at it and deal with it, okay, instantaneous. You're adult. We have the prefrontal cortex. Now imagine you don't. Right? Well, they did. Hold on, wait. They did. It's just not as developed. Oh, that's really small. I thought that would be bigger on the screen. Anyway, when we check our phones, here's what happens. I'm just going to go up here. Here's what happens. You check your phone, right? And you go, ah, that was good, right? Because that's our anticipatory stuff. We now have a reinforcement. Ah, dopamine goes up. Now, dopamine is a very transient neurochemical, which means it'll go back down. Well, then I feel the loss of the dopamine. So what happens? Up to the phone. And that's what winds up happening. It's this constant roller coaster. And what's the way to get on top of the roller coaster? Never put it down. Always have it active. The problem with that is what? Anybody know?
Yes.
Tolerance. Tolerance. Talk about anybody who has an addiction. We develop tolerance. Suddenly, what we used to have isn't enough. We need more and more and more and more and more and more and more. And so that little thing with dopamine that we did every 10, 15 minutes now needs to be done every 5 to 10 minutes. And then every 2 to 3 minutes. And then all the time. Which is why, as soon as it buzzes, even if I'm in the middle of a tennis game, I'm checking. Okay. Yep. POTUS is on the move. Right? I mean, you're not Secret Service, dude. Come on. It really does disrupt the balance. Again, talked about this before. I go to school. I'm living in my black hole of social graves. I'm going around in my lifeboats and hoping everybody's going to, continue to give me food and water. Okay? But the peers are vying for that space because they want to be rowing the lifeboat. They want to be at the top of the line, at the top of the food chain. They want to be the most popular kid. They are vying for the space that you currently have. Hopefully, when you go home, your parents honor you being you. Your peers have an expectation about who you're supposed to be. Hopefully, your parents are just watching you develop, helping you, bumping you along the way, but not rejecting or accepting you based on who you are. That makes sense? Home is your safe space. By the way, this is an actual place. This is not like some Photoshop sort of thing. It's an actual oasis in the middle of some Peruvian desert. It's really cool. I can't remember the name of it, but just look up Peru Oasis and this will come up. Really cool. Okay. Quote from a kid, New York Times article. If I don't keep up with what people are talking about, I'm afraid they will start talking about me, and I don't want to be left out. If I'm not asleep, no, and I'm not asleep anymore. So what are they doing? They're texting. They're on their phones. Before bedtime, well, I'm just multitasking. The number of times that you'll see a kid, he's got his phone out here, he's got his computer on there, he's got some sort of text thing over here while he's doing computer work, and he's looking around all over the place, and I am multitasking, right? Multitasking is a myth. I cannot tell you countless studies that show multitasking is a myth. Okay? Yeah, you can walk and chew gum at the same time because it operates different channels. But when you're trying to do things that operate inside of the same channel, good luck with that. Anybody want to challenge me on that? I am more than happy to do this. All we're going to do, okay, is I'm going to have you write down row, row, row the boat. Row, row, row your boat. Okay? Write down the song for row, 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 row. Everybody know the lyrics? Real simple. Don't have to think about it much. While you're singing Mary Had a Little Lamb. And you will not be able to do it. You can't do both things at the same time. You'll shift back and forth. But if I told you to sing the song and then write it out, you would be done sooner than if you went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Because every time you go back and forth, you have to recalibrate where you are. And you lose that time. So why do kids take so long to do their homework? because they're constantly multitasking. No, they're just wasting time, right? The other thing too is because a part of their brain and their heart is thinking about what do my friends think, what am I doing, am I catching up on things, am I missing something? They got that fear of missing out. They got mood instability oftentimes, and they don't get good family time because they want to get back online and not get lost. Right? After bedtime, somebody did a study. On average, kids send 34 or more texts after lights out. Okay? Which gives you sleep disturbance. Not only in the quantity, but also the quality. Have you ever been worried about something when you fall asleep and the next day you don't feel particularly rested? Yeah? Mm-hmm. What happens if you're wondering whether or not that, hoopla that's going on between two of your friends that you got kind of dragged into? You're wondering how that's going to turn out. You think you're getting good sleep? Nope, you aren't. So even if you get the 8 hours and the average teenager gets 6.5 hours, okay, they need 8 to 10, they get 6.5, right? Ooh, don't even ask me why ADHD is so high as it is, right? If I'm sleep deprived, I really have a hard time paying attention. You know what I use? Coffee. It's a stimulant. It works, right? Boom. So you get sleep disturbance, you have immune system function problems, you get attention problems, you have emotionality problems, anxiety, depression, your academics, your cognitive functioning slows down, your wheels don't turn nearly as fast or as full as they usually do, okay? And then you have safety. Drowsy driving is almost, it's just a little bit lower than drunk driving in terms of fatalities. And we are sending our kids who are drivers to school and back, right, with an inadequately developed prefrontal cortex, a well-developed nuclear accumbens, and sleep deprived. Woo! With a phone. Right? Are you getting where I'm going with this? Does it become apparent yet? No. Here's the other thing that goes on, and this was shocking to find out, right? You got to go through, you can look at different things. Hari does a really good job and still in focus about talking about this, and I'm sitting here because I do audiobooks because it's with me driving and I'm multitasking, right? But eyes on the road, ears on the book, right? Where are my eyes? On the road. Where are my ears? On the book. Do my ears need to be on the road? Not particularly. Most of what we do with driving has to do with our eyeballs, okay? Now, if I'm also reading the book, well, that's a problem, okay? But audiobooks, it's fine. People have been having conversations in cars forever and ever and ever and ever, right? And we haven't outlawed that because why? Conversation happens with our ears, with our mouth, and driving happens with our hands and our eyeballs, unless you're Italian and really excited about this. In which case, you're like, hold on to the wheel. But here's the really disturbing things about cell phones. Algorithms and echo chambers. You have to go back to B.F. Skinner. B.F. Skinner, when B.F. Skinner was the guy who does behavioral stuff, Pavlov was a different guy, he was the guy with the dog. B.F. Skinner looked at, well, what do we do with reward systems? How do we do our timing, et cetera, et cetera? And one of the things that Skinner found was when we have a variable reward schedule, it produces near intractable behavior. This is why gambling is what it is, okay? And this is why video games have taken the kind of hold that they have, because they put them on a variable reward schedule, and when it hits, you're like, yes, I'm due, right? And you kind of see it, right? So that's what it is. Dopamine, okay, is produced when we get a reward. We're like, yeah, that was awesome. Yeah, that was awesome. Ooh, where's the next one? Yeah, that was awesome. Ooh, where's the next one? Social validation produces dopamine, okay? And Do you get socially validated every single time you have an interaction? Do you? Nope. It's on a variable schedule, right? And so we'll stay with it. We'll stay with it. We'll stay with it. Okay? It's not one-on-one. It's variable. Tristan Harris used to work for Google. Okay? And he stopped doing it because he didn't like what they were doing. So he did this thing on 60 Minutes, it's really worth watching if you can get hold of it, called brain hacking. Okay, you talked about brain hacking. Your likes, your friends, your emojis, your tweets, your retweets, your followers. It's all about, am I lovable and do I belong? It's all about that reinforcement of am I okay? Right? That is disturbing. Instagram will deliberately withhold your likes and then hand them all over in a bundle. Why? So that you keep checking it to see if it's there. And you can turn on notifications, so as soon as it's there, you can get back on Instagram. And then they check to see how long do you stay on Instagram when you get back on Instagram. If you're off for 3 minutes, does that decrease the amount of time you spend on Instagram? If it does, let's try 2.5 minutes, or let's try 2.25 minutes. Oh, that seems to maximize it. So we're gonna go ahead and release the stuff 2.25 minutes after you turn it off. Because they have computers, and they're tracking it, and they're making sure that you are on that phone as much as possible, that you are on their site as much as possible. That is how they make money. And they can track it. You know that little thing that says cookies? That didn't used to be there. That's a very, very new thing, last 2-3 years. Before that, they were tracking all of that information. Anybody here have this? You're sitting there, you're talking to your mother-in-law about the fact that little Jimmy is out of diapers, right? And then next thing you know, poof, there's an ad for diapers, right? You're like, how's that? That can't be a coincidence. Well, here's the thing, right? If you were talking to mom about diapers, chances are you were online checking to see where to get diapers. Once you got online, they tracked that you were online and what were you looking for. And next thing you know, that gets built into the little straw man they're making, the little voodoo doll they're making of you, right? The technological voodoo doll they're making of you, and they figure out what it is you want, what it is you like, and they feed it to you. Here's the other piece of really disturbing news. The algorithms watch to see what you click on and how long you stay there, right? And then they offer you content that's consistent. Right? So what's the thing that's going on over in Israel and Palestine? They're going to go ahead and check to see if you're watching. They're going to check to see whether or not you're watching about the latest presidential thing, or you're checking the quarterly elections, and or the midterm elections. If you're checking the midterm elections, they're going to check which ones you're checking. And they're going to check how long you stay on which sites. And then they're going to feed you that information. Why? Because apparently that's what you're interested in. And we tend to click on things that we're interested in. Right? And then here's the next part. Let's say on a scale of, I don't know how to do this, 1 to 10. Okay? With 1 being, I really like thing A. And 10 being I really like thing B, and 5 being I'm kind of in the middle. If you go to 6, they'll offer you 7 content. Okay? If you start clicking on the 7 content, they'll offer you 8, and they'll see what happens. And they'll see where your point is, where's your cutoff point. Most people, okay, if you like chocolate, you probably really like Death by Chocolate, right? Why? Because that's even chocolate. And that's what we do. And they will continue to offer it to you and see where your saturation point is. And then they'll leave it there for a little while, and because we build up tolerance, then they'll push it again. Right? It excites us, and when we get excited, what gets produced? Dopamine. And what does dopamine make us do? It makes us return to whatever produced the dopamine. The more excited we get, the more from the center we get, the more dopamine we produce, and the more likely it is we are to click on that stuff. And they are tracking. All that make sense? That is really, really scary. And who are we handling this to? Who are we handling this to? As adults, we don't even know what's going on. Okay. All right. Last but not least, it disrupts the internalization of the self. See, part of what's supposed to happen, right, when we do as adults, we're like, well, consider the source. What we do is we say, I have this sense of who I am, and I have a sense of what's consistent with who I am and who I'm not. And then, I just kind of measure it all out. When you're an adolescent, you don't really have that. You're moving around a bunch. Why? Because it's just the nature of it. Okay? Has anybody ever played a sport? What happens to your consistency when you're starting out? It's horrible, right? Now, sometimes people will sit there and they'll be like, you swing that golf club here, right? And you're like, well, that's just how I learned. And then they have to undo what you did. Why? Because you did something that worked. Your social system, your self system isn't much different from that. You will do what works. Whatever seems to get you positive feedback from your peers is what you will do. And it was one thing when you went to school and it was just there, and then you recalibrated with your family when you got home. But you don't do that anymore. So you are always looking for that outside, am I okay, am I okay, am I okay, am I okay? It disrupts it actually getting internalized and solidified. That's the problem, because we can always find out if we're okay. Does that make sense? Because that's super, super important, okay? That is the biggest threat that the cell phones pose on a day-to-day basis for people who aren't driving. Because that doesn't happen to 4% of the people using it. It probably happens to like 95% of the people using it. Okay? Our curated online self, it's what we put up there. Okay? Kids will put up and take down things. They'll put up a post, they'll check to see how many likes they get, and if it's not an adequate number of likes in a certain period of time, guess what happens? They take it right back down. They're like, oh, apparently people didn't like that. So let me not put that out there. Oh, apparently people did like that. Then they go onto their friend sites and they like a bunch of stuff, okay? And then they go, oh, wow, that thing that Susie did got a lot of likes. Let me go ahead and post the similar thing that Susie did. Now that's not really who I am, but that gets a lot of likes, and likes feel good. And then after a while, it's not so far off of who I am, and it does feel good, so maybe it's okay. And it's like any other acquired taste, right? How many people drink coffee? Anybody? How many people the very first time they had a cup of black coffee go, oh wow, this is delicious, where has this been my whole life? Now, you're like, this is disgusting, right? Can I get some cream and sugar in this? Can I turn it basically into caramel instead of coffee? Because that would be awesome, I think I'll do that, right? And eventually, slowly but surely, you're like, oh wow, this is a really good cup of black coffee, right? Because you acquire a taste for it. Same thing. Not many people go, vinegar, this is lovely, right? Apple cider and vinegar, woohoo! No, they don't do that, but you acquire that taste. There are so many things that we acquire tastes for, and that's the same thing. We can acquire a sense of self by what gives us positive feedback. Remember the picture of all the dudes? That was a really bad idea. Everybody was doing it, so we did it. We thought it was good, right? That's our curated online self, right? By the way, you can't have 500 significant others. I mean, it's just numerically impossible. Right? I mean, you just don't have time for that. And 500 people just don't know you that well. Okay? But they're your followers. At a, a colleague of mine, and he was, his kid was like, well, I'm going to be an influencer. So I'm going to be an influencer. Right? Look, I've got like, I've got like, 3,000 followers. And his dad is like, well, that's awesome. Why don't you see if you can convince, like, I don't know, convince half of them to just give you like $1 a month. It's a pretty low subscription. I mean, you pay $4.99 to just have Instagram or whatever it is you got there, or whatever that is, right? You pay subscription fees for everything. Just ask them for like $1. It gives you $1,500 a month. You can move out of my house. That'd be awesome. Right? Yeah. Why? Because these people are just clicking on stuff. Why? Because you'll do, I forget, there's a term for it. You guys may know this term. Help me out. Right? It's where you click on, you like something from somebody else so you can get a like from them. Right? If anybody's ever seen Black Mirror, right? With Bryce Howard, what's her name? It's Ron Howard's daughter. Huh?
Bryce Dallas.
Who?
Bryce Dallas Howard.
Yes. Say it louder.
Bryce Dallas Howard.
Bryce Dallas Howard, right? She has this thing, and you real time you put likes and you get feedback about whether or not somebody gave you 5 stars or whatever. And there are communities that they're like, we're a 4.7 community, and we see that you're only at a 4.3. And then there are services that you can go to that will teach you, okay, and help you increase your rating. If you think that's science fiction, it's not. Getting it real time and having communities where you can and can't be allowed, yeah, okay. But your kids, they actually are in groups or out of groups based on their response times. Because if they don't like enough or respond fast enough, they'll be left. That's bad. That's not how it's supposed to be. You're supposed to get somewhere. Anyway. So we've got this. The fear of missing out can intensify, right? The incessant comparison fosters this self of dissatisfaction with your own life. You look at what everybody else has, you think that's the norm, right? I'm sitting there, I'm looking at this oasis in the middle of Peru, and I'm like, I want to go there, right? Can't I go there? Why don't we ever go anyplace fun, right? What, like oases in the middle of Peru? That's the target now? This is what we're shooting for, right? Why? Because I saw what somebody else had. Years back, there was an episode of Town and Country with Ansel Adams, and it was like, do a fire and ice vacation, be the envy of every spring breaker. And it's like, yeah, because that's really the goal. The goal of going on spring break or any vacation is to be the envy of everybody else. It's not to have fun or be with your family or anything like that. It's really just to be the envy of everybody else. That's the target, right? Anyway, here we go. So, this is where you guys are about to not like me. So what happens? What's the alternative? I'm going to go back. We still need to reflect and praise the significant others. We still need to separate and individuate. We needed to do it. We needed to have that long extension cord on the phone. Some kids, got fortunate enough to get a separate line. Parents get a separate line. It's the kid's phone, right? They had 2 lines in their house. Loved it when call waiting came in, right? Because call waiting, you see it, it's busy. Okay, call back. Click. Why don't you give it a few minutes? No, I'm sure she'll be off soon. Like, I've got some psychic ability about when my friend's gonna be off, right? I'm sure she'll be off soon. Honey, I gotta make a call. Just a minute, Mom, right? That's what we would do. It was important back then, it's still important right now, and that's why people gave us, right? That's why sometimes families would have a kid's line once the kids got old enough. So that is fine, all of that is fine. It is necessary, it's important, I'm not saying it's not. It gives you a sense of community, a sense of connection with your peers. It allows you to answer the question, am I lovable? Do I belong? Right? Which is really, really important to know. So here's what I suggest. Get them a phone. A flip phone. Where they can talk to their friends, and they can make plans, and they can gossip till the cows come home, okay? And they're not gonna have something down in text, okay, that can be shared with the school, right? Or the disgruntled parents' attorneys, okay? Because that happens. Don't think it doesn't happen, because it does, and it's down, and it is permanent, and your kid is now expelled, okay? Because stuff got out of hand, and your kid went over the line. Why? Nucleus accumbens, prefrontal cortex. Right? So that's what happened. I didn't say that. No, I didn't say that. Right? Maybe the person recorded it. In the state of Texas, only one person needs to know the line's being recorded. You know that? It's really sad. But it's how it is. Anyway, you still get to talk to your friends. In the meantime, right, you need to focus on your community. I've seen people pull this off. They have parent groups. There's a group of 15, 20, 30 parents, and they all agree kids don't get phones. Here's the home phone number if you need it. And they have a whole separate phone, okay? Just the same way kids always call. I gotta get in touch with my friends. That's great. They have a home phone, right? You guys know this? Like, the plan for this costs, I don't know, whatever it costs. It's like another $15 for my kids to have one. $15 for my other kid to have one, right? I have an office phone. It's another $15. You want to get a house phone? It's $15. That's what it's going to cost you, right? Oh, and you won't have to worry about, how much internet time they're logging, how many gigabytes of data that they use, because flip phones don't use data, right? That's all done, right? Now, can they still get online? Can they still, talk to people on the computer? Of course they can. Yeah, put it in the living room. That's pretty simple, right? Why? Oh, yes. Yeah, I knew this. I knew this. No. See, I knew I was going to get unhappy kid faces. Okay, but that's what it comes down to. Okay, because if you don't, and you let their life live on that phone, okay, here's what winds up happening. Anybody, we're now, I think, is it Gen V that what's the new Gen? Is it Gen V?
Gen Alpha is the newest one.
What was Gen?
Alpha.
No, it's not Alpha. Now, they talked about calling them Gen Vid for a little while.
There's Gen Z, and but there is the younger ones is known as Gen Alpha.
Oh, okay, no, but the Gen Z ones
Yeah.
are like the teenagers and now college kids, because we've left the millennials behind, right? But what do we know about the millennials, right? The millennials needed to know, well, but why do I have to call customers? Well, because your job is in sales. Well, but what are we selling? Like, is it good for the planet? Like, I don't know. I hired you to do sales. If you got a lot of questions, like, I don't know, maybe I'd hire somebody else. Hello, HR? Yeah, I've been bullied. I've been threatened. Yeah, I was just asking questions. Just normal questions, like, is it important? What will it do to the planet? Can I talk to my mom? How many weeks of vacation do I get? How do I get more? Yeah, I'd like to file a complaint with HR. Yeah, you bet. Right? That's what happened. And do you want to know why? didn't do this. See, your millennials were the kids who were told, right? No matter what you do, it's lovely, it's great. You lay golden eggs all the time. Okay? And if you make one that's not gold, I'm going to distract you, cover it, polish it, and go, look what you did. Right? That's the generation that we raised. It's our fault. It's always our fault. By the way, it's always our fault. Right? Because it's not like they grew up in a vacuum. Right? They weren't like, well, I mean, it would be our fault anyway. It's not like we left them out and they were raised by wolves. It's not like Mowgli. Right? No. It's boom. So if we don't support this secure self-system, if we keep allowing that self-system to live outside of us, outside of our kids, here's what happens. Yeah. If you need more affirmation, get yourself a puppy. The rest of us are trying to work. If you want to know that they're special, they're special. Get you special. There's a great thing, by the way, if you ever want it, demotivatorsdespair.com. They've got tons and tons and tons of these. Right? Right? They're like, you know, hard work may pay off in the future, but procrastination always pays off right now. Yeah. That's it. That's all I got. I have lots more stuff in my head, and it's really hard to keep this down to some reasonable amount of time. But thanks for coming. I appreciate it. Questions? Any questions? Other than where do I live and when do I go to sleep and do I have an alarm? So I already know. I was watching the wheels turning over there. I was like, I'm going to get this. Yeah.
But how are you supposed to combat that? Because even though we restrict the phones, we restrict a lot of that as much as we can, they're still being bombarded with it. I would go to a small private school. A lot of the parents, you know, maybe they don't have, maybe kids don't have cell phones, or they have computers. I mean, there are group chats, and we live in group chats, and I'm like, we take the phones at night. Because we can't not do that, because we tried that experiment, that didn't work.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'll look at the chat and I'm like, holy moly, in the last 10 minutes, there's been 100 notifications. And I'm like, I couldn't handle that as an adult.
It's too much.
And
It's too much. I wish I had an easy answer. I really do. I wish I had an easy answer like, oh, just do this. I mean, I do have a just do this answer, right? But it's like, you know, oh, I'd like to lose weight. Well, have you tried eating less and exercising some more? Yeah? Well, that's what I got for you. Thanks. Right? Because that is the answer. Now, it's hard to do that on a regular basis, right? It's not like there aren't challenges to doing it, but the answer is pretty simple. We don't allow 24/7 access to other people telling me who I am, to my need to seek social approval. I have to have a break from that, right? And so what we do is we limit the amount of time. Once upon a time, it was like, is all your homework done? Because get off the phone if your homework's not done, right? When you had the long cord, and all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, Bill, Mom! Right? Why? Because Mom would just go, click, right? She'd hang it up from where the receiver is, right? Which became very difficult to do with cordless phones, right? But you know how we got around that? You just pull the jack out of the wall. And that was it, because like that was the base wasn't connected to anything, right? And so there was always that option, and that allowed us to recenter, to be with what our base is. Because when we do too much of that with kids, we see this in study after study. There's anxiety, there's depression, there's the comparison, there's the insecurity. Okay, Jean Twenge, I can't remember. Incidence rates of narcissism have tripled in the last 30 years. Tripled. 3 times as many. And that's as rated by clinicians. That's not as rated by people who are unhappy with their ex and therefore label. No, that's not how that's done. That is actual clinically diagnosed. Okay? It is tripled. Why? Because I don't have a self. My self lives outside of me. And I have to have that constant approval because it's not inside of me. That's why it happens. I could talk for like that. But yeah, that's why it happens. So we do the best that we possibly can. We do the absolute best that we can, right? So what do? Right? In the 70s, were there kids sneaking out and smoking? Yeah, there were. So what do you do to make them stop smoking? Well, it's probably best if you don't smoke. That's for starters, right? Number 2, we educate them, right? Number 3, if we find cigarettes in the house, you get rid of them. Number 4, right? If you find that they are using their lunch money to get cigarettes, you say, I don't know what you're going to do for lunch, but I'm not going to support your smoking habit anymore. And clearly that's what you're using the money for. Well, you're just going to let me starve? No, you can bring a bologna sandwich from home. That's fine. I'll go to the store and get you some bologna right now, right? Because bologna is what you're handing me about what you're using the money for, so I figure I'll just give you some bologna as well, right? So boom, we'll just call it even, all right? And that's what we've done. And that makes them stop smoking? Nope, doesn't. There's actually no indication that that actually makes them stop smoking, but at least you're not supporting it. Right? Once upon a time, you would almost never find a home where the parents threw a supervised keg of cases of White Claw as the kids were hanging around the pool. 14, 15, 16-year-old kids hanging around the pool, guzzling down White Claw. You wouldn't have found that. You'd have found that at the parents' house where nobody was home. But if there were parents at home, that didn't happen. It did happen at Dennis's house, but Dennis's parents were legitimate hippies, right? And we knew that, and everybody knew that. Everybody knew that that was the irresponsible home. That's how we designated it. Now, those are the cool parents. That's right. I'm cool because it's probably better if they drink while I'm watching, even if I'm drunk while I'm watching, right? Yeah. Yep, that's what we do. So if you don't do that, you're probably helping. It's all it is. All we do is we make attempts at making it better by not feeding them wrong. Does that make any sense?
It does.
I wish I had a quick answer, just do this and always better.
So I'm with you. I mean, we try everything that we can, but then there's the world. Society does not help us raise our kids. They actually do the opposite. Are we, I mean, you've seen so much. So at this point right now, we all know that I know. Well, but we know the concept of things have to get really, really bad before they can get better. Where are we right now? Because it seems that we're at a place, you're starting to see schools on the news talking about turning in your cell phones. You're starting to see advertisements for the first time, finally, about depression and social media's connection. We finally see that commercial for the first time ever. Where was that back in 2010 when some of us in these groups were talking about this just because of our professions? So now, what do you think the answer is for society? Do we need to start going to Austin? Do we need to start actually demanding that, there isn't as much tech inside schools even? Because that's just, cell phones is just one thing. iPads too early in a child's life, I mean, all of it is all part of a grander problem. So, I mean, what is the answer right now for us? Because my kids are babies. I mean, they're 5 and 2, and we are iPad free. They cannot hold our cell phones. That is not something that they're allowed to do. And we talk about why. We talk about it robs you of your imagination if you're on a cell phone too early, if you're on an iPad too early. So, but here we have iPads in schools even, and we're coloring on iPads instead of with a pencil and a crayon.
It's really scary.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's really scary. And crayons, most kids figure out that crayons don't, despite their smell, they don't taste good. And they certainly don't, there's no correlation with color and flavor. at all, right? M&Ms, by the way, hate to spoil it for you, but also true with M&Ms. No correlation between color and flavor. Skittles, a little bit different. Gummy bears, a little bit different, but M&Ms definitely not. Same thing with crayons. And the scented markers, they don't taste good. They taste like marker. You know, don't ask me how I know. You know, but that's what it is. So, yes, kids just need to be kids. They need to sit, they need to create, right? We need to find spaces for them. But you're not going to do that until you move into the school, right? So I'm going to go someplace else first, right? And that is, you know, bullying. You guys know about bullying. Bullying. And that rolled in kind of like 2005, you know, Queen Bees and Wannabes, Mean Girls, all that stuff, right? All that stuff rolled in, and everybody was, you know, was hot on the topic. And they would go in, and I would go ahead, and I'd be like, yeah, I'm sure I'll come in and I'll talk. And then I'd come, and I remember I usually would only get to come once, because I would sit there and I'd come up, and I'd be like, yeah, I'm probably not going to get invited back, but I can already tell you the school has a problem with bullying, and I don't know. You've got to make some changes before that's going to change. And let me tell you about my experience this morning. I was running late because I've got just enough ADHD to make me fun, and also just a little bit late. And so that was me. So I'm coming up, and I'm like, oh, cool. Ooh, thank goodness there are parking spaces at the very front of the school. Except my last name isn't one of those last names. Apparently, there are spaces at this school for the people who really matter, because they get to park in front, like the principal. Now, you get the principal kind of would have a space up in front, right? Head of school, space in front. The counselor, the vice principal, all this other stuff. But the Jones family? When that kid does something, do you think they play by the same set of rules all the other ones do? They don't. They don't. I can tell you that. When one of their friends, when one of the family friends does something, do you think that kid plays by the same set of rules everybody else does? No, they do not. No, they do not. And you won't get rid of it until you really, really buy into what gets rid of it. You can't have it partially true. It doesn't work. Okay? Nobody's kind of pregnant. Right? You either are or you're not. Okay? That's all there is to it. And it's the same thing. So what you have to do is you have to move into the school, and the school needs to stay, right? Oh, Jimmy wasn't even doing anything. And it's like, yeah, that's the point. So Billy was sitting there, right, grinding Scotty down, and Jimmy was sitting there doing nothing. So Jimmy's in trouble. But he wasn't doing anything. I don't think you're paying attention to what I'm saying. The fact that he was doing nothing supported it. It basically told everybody it's okay to pick on them. That's what he said. And until the parents are like, that's fair. I don't want my kids going to that kind of school. And if I don't want my kids going to that kind of school, then I have to deal with the fact that my kid didn't step in when he could have. And therefore they're in trouble. You bet. But schools don't. They just don't. And that's why a lot of those programs don't work. It's not because the programs don't work. Okay? If I'm on a diet and I get 4 cheat days a week, how well do you think that thing works? Not well. Right? Same thing.
But it doesn't work because it's inconvenient for the school to have to try and enforce it, and to get the parents to buy into it.
Yes. Well, that's, okay, so wait. It is no more inconvenient, hold on, I'm gonna go back up. It is no more inconvenient. I went to school in Atlanta, and in Atlanta, I was down there in started 88. In 1989, there was something that came on the news. Okay? In Forsyth County, now you have to think about Forsyth County. You know where Harris County is? Forsyth County is like Fort Bend County. Relative to Atlanta, Forsyth County, okay, which is DeKalb County, right? Forsyth County is like the next county over. It's like the Fort Bend to Harris County. And in the Fort Bend to Harris County, in the adjacent county, a kid was paddled at school. 1989, a kid was paddled. News got hold of it, all over the news. Kid shouldn't have been paddled. Why was the kid paddled? Any idea? This boy. 1989, what hairstyle was popular? Business in the front, party in the back. The mullet. There you go. The mullet. And you know why he was paddled? Because his hair touched his collar. And that is not how we do things. And there was a big, big debate at the school about whether or not that was appropriate. With a lot of parents going, yeah, it wasn't. That's not the kind of school we want. But enough parents said, no, we can't have that anymore. Right? Anybody ever watch Mr. Holland's Opus? Mm-hmm. You see what happened? That's what happened. Because 10 years prior to that, there's no way the parents would have ever sent the kid to school like that. They already knew it was going to be a problem. And so the kid didn't even get to do that. And there was nobody in the school, parents included, that would have said, well, maybe it's okay. They would have just said, it's not okay. We just don't do it. Period. And that's how it works. But everybody's got to get behind it. But that's not where we are. We're no longer there. Right? It's hard. Everybody kind of wants an individualized agenda. Right? Everybody wants an individualized thing. The number of kids who have individualized education plans, you have any idea how hard it is to be a teacher these days? And it's not like they're making more money, right? There's just individualized education plans. Here's a fun one. I'm about to do this testing, and I really struggled with it for a little while. I'm about to do this testing, okay, for somebody who's going to take the CPA exam. And they want to get extended time and extended days for the CPA exam. Okay? Because they get anxious and they can't complete it in the allotted time. And so in order to not penalize them, okay, for their disability, the anxiety that they have, the attention deficit, but they haven't done the testing yet, that they now, much like having a ramp for someone in a wheelchair, need to have extended time on the CPA exam. Okay? Has anybody here ever used the CPA? Yeah. How do they charge? Right? They charge by the hour. Do you think I have the right as a consumer to know that I'm going to get upcharged by 50 or by 50 to 100% because my dude's slow? Do you think I have a right to know that? I think I do. I think if you got extended time, if you took the bar exam with extended time, right? If you took your MLEs, your medical licensing exam with extended time, because you can do that. I bleed slower in the waiting room. If you get nervous, I'll just bleed slower. Don't worry about it. Right? Hey, look, if you just need to take 18 recesses, right, in court and just keep charging me by the hour for all the court time you got, when you do court prep, it takes you, 3 times longer to get that court prep done. Don't worry, I'll just pay for that, right? I don't know that it's taking you 3 times longer because I don't have that information. But don't you think that's fair? Don't you think that's consumer awareness? Right? Don't you think that should be part of the informed consent? We fill out informed consent. Why am I not informed of this information? Right? And all of this goes to everybody wants to have things individualized for them in the way that's most convenient for them. And until we say, no, there has to be some kind of standard here, we're going to keep having problems. Because you're going to have a group who wants to do A and a group who wants to do B. And whoever wants to do B, if B is more convenient, that is what will win out. It always does. Whatever's the most convenient is the thing that wins out. Okay? What's this? Okay? If I lose this, I'll spend 45 minutes trying to figure out where it is. Okay? Way faster than I'll go up to the TV and just go. That's what I'll do. Because this is convenient. Even if I go through an inconvenience to find my convenience, that's what I'll do. All right? Got a question?
Yeah, I guess I thought you might get into the, let's say, nefarious actors more than you had. I mean, let's say.
Nefarious actors.
Yeah, so let's say if China is managing TikTok to depress people who use drugs that China will
Okay.
kill people with,
Okay.
China wins
Okay.
because we've destroyed our economy.
Okay.
100,000 deaths a year,
Okay.
per year.
Okay.
And to go and say it, Instagram is doing their thing, I don't think unrelated.
Yeah.
They all want to make money and they all want to be happy with the Chinese making money. So I think the notion of, I'm going to be a parent and pull and collect the cell phones, I just wonder if they're just being outgunned.
If they're being what?
Outgunned. I mean, TikTok is,
Yes.
billions of dollars a year go into making TikTok.
That's right.
Addictive.
Guess what?
It's addictive.
Guess what? So TikTok makes bullets.
Yes. And that's, you're saying, the weapon?
You can hand my kid as many bullets as you like. If I don't give them the gun to stick the bullets in, they don't get, the bullets are useless. The bullets are absolutely useless.
But again, that to me was the entry drug to get people depressed. There was a Wall Street Journal article today, I don't know if you happen to see it, but talking about some hospital in New York where now thousands of kids are trying to get medical help because their parents are saying, literally, my kid is trying to kill themselves.
Yes.
So
Depression, anxiety, it all goes up.
yeah,
It all goes up. And all of those things go up because I don't have enough sense of me that when my feedback disappears or turns negative, I can't make it. I can't make it. And the sooner you let your kids be on that diet of, oh yeah, no, do the TikTok thing, definitely. See what scantily clad video you can put out there, kiddo. The sooner you let them do that, right, the sooner they'll become addicted to it. Because it is designed to be addictive. It is designed to be addictive. That guy I can't remember his name, Harris, he used to work for Google. He quit Google, and what he does is he goes around and he's like responsible programming. He does responsible programming. And that's what he gets hired for. He got hired on, I can't remember, I was reading something, he got hired on by some agency, and he was like, or one of the companies, and he said, do you know this and this and this and this, right? And he said, I've got documentation here of this and this and this and this. And they were like, oh yeah, but we'll need you to leave now. They hired him because he's a big name, okay? And they wanted to say that they hired a big name to come and help them with their company because they were being responsible. And then when he found something they didn't want him to find, they let him go. Right? Why? It's about the money. It's about the finances. It's whatever's going to turn the dollars is what we're going to do. And yeah, this talk could have been an entire week's work. They have entire conferences to address this. Week-long conferences with, 20, 30, 40 presenters per day for an entire week. Yeah, I could have taken this in 12 million directions. But from a psychological standpoint, the thing that I care about most is, who are you? Whenever it goes off the rails, that's always how you fix it. When somebody develops a good internal sense of self, they have a sense of security, right? So when we talk about attachment, which gets a lot of play now, when you talk about attachment, they talk about secure attachments. It's not a coincidence that Sullivan, I don't know, 70, 80 years ago, was talking about safety and security. Am I competent? Am I loved? Am I lovable? Do I belong? And when somebody is insecure, has an insecure attachment, they need that feedback. Am I okay? Am I okay? Am I okay? Or, oh, that's too much, give me some space. Whoa, that's too much, give me some space. I don't want to be smothered here. I don't need to be smothered, I'm independent. You know, I don't do that, because you're smothering me, right? That's not a secure attachment. And you watch, and little kids do the same thing, right? Ainsworth Strange Situation, if you ever get a chance to watch some of those tapes, the early stuff, the video quality is horrible. It's like, you know, VHS or beta or whatever it is. But the video, it's horrible. But it's so funny because you'll watch on some of them. So the kid, here's the way you do the strange situation paradigm for attachment, right? So what you do is mom and the kid come in and they're playing, they're doing their thing, right? And there's an experimenter that's in there and they're playing with mom and the kid, et cetera, et cetera. And then mom gets up and she leaves. And the kid's like, where'd mom go? Right? Now some kids are like, okay, whatever, right? Other kids like go to the door and they're like, and you can see they're clearly distressed. Eventually they stop being distressed. And then, what I'm thinking about, right, is sometimes what will happen, mom comes back, and most typically what happens is the kid gets up and reunites with mom, right? Mom goes, oh, it's so good to see you. I just had to go to the bathroom, whatever it was, right? So good, so glad to see you. Oh, what are you playing with? And the kid's like, oh, cool, mom's here, reconnected, got it, now I can play again, right? And that's a secure attachment. There are other kids that mom's really got to take a lot of time to like work the kid in, right? And those are kids who have an anxious attachment, okay? But the interesting ones to watch are the kids who, you know, when mom comes back, they're playing with the toys, and they look over, and they're like, if they knew how to use their fingers independently, I know which ones they'd be using, right? Because that's what it is. They're like, you left me, let me show you how much I care about you, right? And that's at like 18 months, right? And those are the kids who have an avoidant attachment style later on. Now, as I told you before, you can start out with an avoidant, and if you're with somebody who's got a secure enough attachment, right, you can actually shift that avoidance into a more secure attachment style. Same thing. If you can be anxious, and if you start out anxious and you're with somebody who's got a secure attachment style, you can become more securely attached. You can become more certain. The anxious and avoidant styles don't do such a great job, but they can. They can kind of meet in the middle somewhere. It's pretty rare, okay? But again, all of this to say, our styles, our sense of attachment, our sense of security, okay, shifts and changes over the years. Because originally it starts out with mom and dad, and then kind of our family, right? All depending, brothers, sisters, grandma, grandpa, aunts, uncles, depending on, you know, so if you've got that, you know, like big fat Greek wedding sort of family, then lots of people are involved. And then you move out to your peers. And depending on your interactions with your peers, and remember the black hole of social grace, right? And the 24/7 access to the black hole of social grace, right? Your peers can actually shift your attachment style. If it was secure when you were home, and you now move developmentally into the appropriate place of turning to your peers and saying, how am I? And your peers do the dog-eat-dog thing, you can actually become more avoidant or more insecure, right? You guys know what hookup culture is, right? What do you think that's all about? That's all about not being attached. Pretending as though it doesn't matter, right? That you're very secure. Except, of course, when you talk to those kids, they're like, I don't know what I should do. I did this and I don't want to do that one. And they're constantly trying to curate how they're supposed to be. It's amazing. So much fun. Anyway, so there's that. But that's, again, that's the answer. The sooner we go back to, yes, you go out to the wild world, but then you come back to your oasis, out to the wild world, back to your oasis. The more that is the pattern, the more we'll move away from where we're headed to. Okay. By the way, what do we do? Also PS, and by the way, I would love, 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 love. I'd be one of the first people that would install in my vehicle cell phone disruptor. Lives in the middle of the steering wheel. Okay. You got 3 feet. Okay. You can't use a cell phone. The screen dies. You can't do anything with the screen, okay, unless you're 3 feet. So the person over the passenger side is like doing this against the window. But I know what would happen. You'd have drivers, and this is what it would look like if you were behind them. You know it, but at least it would be so blatantly obvious at that point, right? Because it's not now. I was sitting there today, right? All of a sudden, somebody starts careening over into my lane. Why? So what do? I'm from New York. I lay on the horn. That's what we do, right? And guess what? They were singularly appreciative of my helping. You know how they let me know? They told me I was #1. I'm used to a different one. It's used to a different figure saying that. You know, but some people will say 3 like this, some people will say 3 like this, some people say you're #1, other people might use different digits. But you know, that's it. You know, they were very appreciative of my helping. Anyway, but yeah, I'd be the first person that would sign up for cell phone disruptors. And that distracted driving, when your phone doesn't work, your phone just doesn't work. You won't even bother picking it up because it doesn't work. Nobody goes to a Coke machine that says out of order and starts sticking change in it. Nope. We would already know it's not going to work. Why bother? Right?
Except
That
the
makes
map function.
What's that?
Lack of the map function.
Yeah,
would
so
kill
it's-
500,000 people a year.
Yeah, so the other thing that's really, really interesting about the map function, because they've done research on that too, we have the capacity, remember old school maps, you used to take map folding in high school? Old school maps, people would look at a paper map, okay? In the city of Houston, as in many cities, we had something called a key map, where you could get pretty detailed, and then they'd update it depending on construction. You'd get pretty detailed looks of different sectors. And you would go and you would use a function that we have in our brain called top-down mapping, right? We actually develop a top-down map, okay, inside of our brain to move around, okay? Does that make sense? That's what we did. Now, really, really interesting thing, okay? They took some senior citizens who were using GPS a lot and other ones who weren't. This is when the GPS and the follow the blue dot thing went around, right? And for the ones who were driving old school, just via maps they had in their head and fold-out maps that they had in the car, they didn't get lost at the living community nearly as much as the people who follow the blue dot. Why? Because as we don't use that anymore, we lose that skill, right? So, oh, but we need to use the GPS? Nope, we didn't have GPS for the longest time, and people figured out where they were going anyway. So our brains still have that ability. Evolutionarily, we still have that ability once we start tapping into it. It was a long time ago, somebody was like, is it possible to have a foreign language learning disorder? I'm like, yeah, it's just really fortunate that you were born in the United States, because had you been born anywhere else, you'd been functionally mute, right? Because apparently English is the only language you can learn. Does it make any sense? Of course it doesn't make any sense. No, you can't have a foreign language learning disorder. No. Right? Yeah, it's amazing. Sometimes we just don't think it. Anyway, thanks for letting me be up here and do this. I really appreciate that. I love doing this. I love to teach you stuff like that.
May I make a quick comment and a question?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go late and all of us have to go home. I'm new to the Smart Family Lectures. I love this idea. I'm holding strong against my husband. I firmly believe no phones for as long as you can hold out. But, so I have a confession. I am 44 years old and I have no social media. No Facebook, nothing. Never have no interest in it. And I'm very grateful that I don't, because I hear these stories about, like what you were saying, all this, you get depressed looking at someone else's life and you think it's great. And my husband will tell me, oh, you know, this guy that I thought was super happy at work, just told me he's getting divorced. He's like, but you wouldn't know it because everything that's being posted on Facebook and this social, so to me, that just validated what I've done because I have no desire to do it. My husband tells me that we're going to make our kids socially awkward if we don't, but I kind of feel like, I don't know if this can be added to it or just a thought. Because I saw this on like the Ellen DeGeneres show before it went off the air. There was a parent who said to their child, if you hold off until you're 18 to get any social media, I will get you $1,800. This is when the kid was like 10 or 12, so he didn't have a concept of how much money that was.
Yeah.
And then he said it was really hard towards the end to keep that promise to his mom because he would talk to friends that were working summer jobs and making $1,800. But I feel like it's not just the gadget, it's not just the phone, it's what they're doing on the phone. So I feel like maybe there should be a pledge for not just not having a phone, but like no social media until a certain age. I don't see a whole lot of good coming from it, but I don't know, I had to do the disclaimer that I don't have social media myself.
Yep.
I'm sure it's good for connecting with old.
Yeah, I'll take this time to talk a little bit about smart families. Why not? Right? So, yeah. So actually, that is part of our component a little bit. Like a big part of it, what the big push is at the school. So to give a little bit of background on what we're doing and where we're at too. We're at 18 of the Catholic schools, and because like part of the issue too is like I've been hearing from everyone talking. Give him a round of applause first.
Yes.
So a lot of the wonder and the things that we're actually going to be putting out in our newsletter content, actually, like we have this big thing that we call it the smart solution. You just kind of told it with like the family landline, essentially returning back to something basic, right? But we're so much more, like at these schools, like we're not here just to bring speakers, like we're here to empower communities. That's our whole goal, right? Because it's not just it's not good enough just for like me not to get my kid. What about this other kid? Like I'm talking to thousands of different parents in different schools and things that are happening. Like my coworkers are calling counselors and they're finding, like you won't hear about some of the stuff that's happening with smartphones specifically, right? Like it's not, I know in New Jersey they just had an incident with like the AI and what they're doing at the high school, right? That's not just there. Like there are incidences where students in these schools are like taking pictures of teachers and putting them in inappropriate bodies and everything else. And you have them take it, there's a trend on TikTok where you steal school property and you film it and you hide it. There was an incident of cyberbullying at one school where like some kids might be expelled for how it escalated and there was like a threat against violence against one of the schools, right? The benefit of like having smart families at these schools, like at St. Thomas More and everywhere else, is one, we can help parents stay together. Right, the pledge that we have about not delaying the smartphone, that's just like step one, right? Everyone, one standard, like here, as a community, we're not going there. We want the best for our kids. We want them to explore. We want them to have that downtime. We want them to develop into good, like holy people. We want our families to remain good families. There's a scary stat in like that my coworker found that like the average face-to-face time that parents have with their kids, it's like 4 to 5 hours a week. I can't even imagine that. I think that, but I don't, like, I'm like, that's crazy. But then I hear stories about.
I'm gonna give you one other thing. You know the average, 4 to 5 hours per week, you know the average amount of time that a kid will be surfing the internet / Facebook, Instagram? 2 to 3 hours a day.
Yeah, I believe it. I'm at one.
So you're looking at like 3
Yeah.
times as much.
I'm at one student, her screen time was 15 hours from the night before. Or just like that day. Her mom was horrified. She's like, we'll talk. But she got 2 hours of sleep that night. And just like, I used to work with high school students, middle school students, like, and I would thought for a second, like, oh, I'd tell them where I'm going, like, oh, they're like shamey or whatever, like, you're gonna do what? They were actually like, that's a really good idea. Because I think, like, it doesn't, once you introduce it, like, we all know there's a reason why you're off social media. There's a reason why we're doing these things. Like smartphones are like the modern day cigarette. And what did we do? It was communities that got together and said, no, I'm not going to do this, right? And that's what Smart Families is about. It's about empowering the communities and everything else too. That's what the pledge is about. And like we want to roll out the small group, grade level gatherings to just talk about these issues. That way, even for the middle school students that have given out smartphones, right? Like their feedback's important for the younger grades. Even though we're pushing for like no smartphones until high school, like we know like that genie's out of the bottle for those grades, but what are you doing to help mitigate that damage? What are you doing to keep your kids safe? How can you share that to the lower level community?
how can you share like what else is going on? What are some of these, or what material that we can bring to the community as a resource? Because that's what we want to do, right? Is like to provide any obstacle that's going to be financially resourced, because like a lot of parents don't have that time to research what apps are good or what apps you can use on your phone, for example, or your laptop that can like filter out like inappropriate images. Canopy is a good one that uses AI, a good function of AI that can stream your laptop images and you don't have to worry about blocking the website. It filters it out. There's many things like that. Or like, what are some dumb phone alternatives that are cheap or more substantial? I know I have a good list of them already, like that I could tell you about. But that's the whole purpose of the pledge for that. But another component of it, because is to delay. We're taking one firm stand on the smartphone, but we want to delay social media too, because I seen it on the kids that I was with. I feel it for myself of how it robs me of my time and my focus and away from my family, let alone a kid who just needs that time, as Dr. Goodman was saying, just to come to know their own self and their self-worth and their identity and become like a good person, right? And not have to struggle with internal conflict day after hour, honestly. So that's kind of like one thing we're going to do. Sure.
So I know it takes a while to get people on board.
Yeah.
With schools that you've been in, where they're doing it right,
Yeah, let's talk
and you've
about
got hundreds of people listening to this instead of just a few, how do you get to that level? How do you get people to actually care?
So two things. When this program was first started, there's about this many people in the room when Dr. Collar came out. I mean, even at the original school at St. Vincent de Paul, right? What makes it different is you just have the community that says, not here, and we want to do something about it. And it's literally getting together and talking about it. It's literally encouraging, because what happens is like, talks like this, you're going to get the same people that come in and come in and come in. And then we have so many, I mean, granted the weather was bad, I'll give them that. But let's take away the excuses, right? I have one principal, and this is something we may be talking about too. No homework night for the kids. And offer childcare, food for the parents, food for the kids. Like that seemed to work really well at one school. We have some schools that didn't have that, but you have a strong leader that's just like a couple parents that are like, let's do this. And they went like, at one school, they have 700 kids. They got about 20% of people sign the pledge before even rolling out these grade level meetings. Like all it takes is just a little bit of leadership, a little bit of giving out that information. Like I have these pledge cards, but if you want me to just email you the pledge QR code so you can just text people that, let me know and I'll send that. Whatever the school wants, whatever parents want to make this happen, like we can do this, right? And it just starts with something small. Sometimes it's just holding like a fun little social event so people can get together. Whether or not be going to a restaurant and just saying, hey, we're just going to have margaritas and fajitas. Like, come by here and we can go talk about this and come up with a game plan. Sometimes it's just getting people out. I think sometimes it's overcoming these obstacles that people might have. Either ship has already sailed, there's no benefit for me, but they lose the focus on the benefits they can give to someone else, that wisdom. Because I have not met one person that said, you know what the greatest idea of my life was? I gave my kid a smartphone. It always, always, always. By the time it's like, that was the worst decision of my life, right? But people need to hear that. Because I think that the younger grades, there's this apathy where it's just like, oh, it's not here yet. But it is here. Because there are some schools that some kids have smartphones when they're in first grade. That might be here, right? But it's also allowing, like, we know the incidents that happen where, like, on the playground when someone is gathered around a smartphone. It's better to just say no as a community and make it easier for people to say no, right? And that's where that pledge comes in the key. It's not about like, oh, look how good I am. But it's about literally saying not here, and we're not doing this. It's not good for our kids. It's not good for our families. It's not good for our community. And that's just, sometimes it's a slow build. But as long as there's that slow, there's a good quote that my coworker just told me about, like Boston chicken, I think it was, versus Chick-fil-A or something like that. And Boston Chicken was like, we want to just expand, and we're going to make like $2 million in 2 years. And Chick-fil-A is like, how are we going to come compete? And they had this board meeting and everything else. And one guy said, slow down. If we want to grow, we want to grow right. Even if it takes slower. You do it quality-wise, we'll still grow. We just want a good product. Well, 2 years, the one company, Boston Chicken's filing for bankruptcy, Chick-fil-A makes their first $1 million. It's the same process. It's better to start small and to have that traction rather than just to do nothing at all or just do something that's so grandiose that it burns out. So it's just learning to do it well and seeing things what works. And that's a good thing about any like grass-led, like boots on the ground movement. That's what we're doing, right? It comes from the community. And if that's like, we just gotta see what works. It's gonna get messy. It's not gonna be pretty some days. And some days you're gonna have wins. Like we are seeing that. There are schools that we're at like 20% of the pledges before, and we're just rolling it out. And all it takes is just constant trying, trial and error, doing different things to see what works, what doesn't work. So, but yeah, if you're going to the school, here's one thing. If you have not yet signed the pledge, or you're not sure if you signed the pledge, I can give you guys this. You can take a picture of this, you can send it to people, you can take a copy, you can go hand these out. For those who don't have kids at the school, or you're at the parish, or just visiting, or whatever, you can still subscribe to our newsletter. And we have content that comes out, I think, pretty much monthly now. We'll see, it seems to be our general flow of things. So if you want to just do this, or just look at our content, smart-families.org. So that's our website, but if you want to scan this, if you want to contact me and just have a conversation about what else we can do, I can connect you with the parent leader, and she's not here tonight, or just the group of people that are already starting it. And let's brainstorm and come up with different ideas to get this track moving, right? And that's what we want to do. So again, yeah, go ahead.
So just quick question, so the schools that you've had implemented this, and you're getting some traction, is the school making changes themselves? In
Some.
that, like, for the technology side of it, right? Like, are they rolling back the electronic books and actually going back to paper books? Because I gotta tell you, like the electronic book, I hate it. I cannot stand it. I'm like, you're putting my kid in front of advice.
Most parents hate them. I will tell you this much. There's some schools have already started moving back that way.
Okay.
It's one thing too to know, like, to educate parents to know that, like, once that device leaves off that network settings, like, it's fair game, right? The safety features. So it's just being aware of those things and those other opportunities. But I will say some of the schools that already taken off have already taken preemptive steps too. So I know one, they just banned the smartphones even after school, phones after school, because they saw that even after school activities, the kids were just on the smartphones and they're at practice. And there's schools that are moving that direction, and we're making our own recommendations for the diocese of like what we recommend doing, and we'll see if that holds too. And that might be a policy that is, at least for starting with the smartphones. Chromebooks are a different task, but I will say there's definitely studies out there that show pen and paper increases test scores by, at least, I know at one school they said, I think it's like what, the STAR test, the one that goes, I'm not like familiar with the different private school tests. I'm from Michigan, so like I know it's the one that goes into high school. They only do pen and paper because their test scores they found, if they did it online, like comparatively, when they did have pen and paper, it's 20 plus points, like on average.
Your brain has to process things differently. When you have to put it through your visual system, encapsulate it, and then put it down with your hand, it forces you to slow down enough so that it actually locks it in, so it actually encodes the data, right? And that's why you remember things more when that happens. But when you're just looking at it in a screen,
There's a reason why Steve Jobs sends his kids to anti-tech schools.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's what
USC.
Silicon Valley is.
Silicon Valley has the most anti-tech schools
Yep.
than any place.
Yeah, and that makes you wonder. It's like, why is
They
it
all-
good
they
for?
all-
Why is
No,
why is
it's
this
done, yeah.
this information not good for your kids, but you want to make a profit off of it?
Exactly.
So those are the things. But those are conversations like that. Like one of the things we bring up all this education, different empowerment things, but like those conversations that we want to have and things like that. Like, why not? I'm sure Carolina would love to hear these different feedback and like.
There's nothing more that I would like to see our school to be done a little bit more
There it is.
on that side. It's something that I believe for our family personally, and something I was hoping that would be really exciting for our community. It's been slightly disappointing to see that it hasn't pulled in as much, as many numbers as I was expecting. I I do think that our pre-K and our first grade, kinder first, pre-K families are a little bit more on board, whereas our second graders and up are kind of, it's disheartening to see, because I know the ages of those kids, and I'm like, you know, it's just hard to see. But it's not something that I can mandate, it's something that is in the families. We don't have phones in the school, so our stance there is pretty solid. It has to come from families' desire to do that. So.
And we're contracted at each school for 3 years. So it might just be a slow build, and that might be the target that we hit, is just, maybe that's what, like, let's start there. Let's have a grade level meeting with the pre-K through first, and let's get those numbers in, and let them pledge that way. And, like, let's make, we can create incentives for parents to, like, also do this. And I think a lot of people too, I've seen this, because when I do talks, I usually say, you know, hold up the, put up a pledge sign or whatever, and they'll take the QR code. I see so many phones going up, or I see, like, people take material, but it doesn't, like, convert over based on, like, how many actually do. So I'm curious too. It's like, oh, I gotta talk to my husband first, or I gotta go do this, and then it just falls on the back burner. I do think there is some of that too, but I think, like, let's start somewhere. Some movements better than none, no movements whatsoever, and that means we just, like, hold that together and start there, and then see how it builds up, and then we include more, and just like, hey, like, let the younger lead the older, and then let this. Once more people start seeing those, like, hey, this is actually more important than what I thought it was, or this, I didn't realize, and that's where the peer pressure kind of flips in. It gets rid of there's a lot of people that will come to these talks and go, yeah, duh, like, sign me up for this. Some people, for whatever reason, just they don't have that same conviction about it, maybe just apathy towards it, but they just, once they see other people kind of doing it, kind of plays into the affirmation part.
I think one of the things that you're always going up against is once you allow for it, and then you've got to put it back, right? So it's pretty easy. So when you think about it, it's pretty easy to win the argument of why your pre-K kid doesn't need a smartphone. It's a pretty easy argument to win, right? I mean, it's really like, so make the argument. Go ahead, right? And other than you're just kind of, and I say things that are not correct sometimes, but you're just really being lazy as a parent. If you're handing your kid, if you're handing your preschooler a smartphone, it's really just lazy. There are so many things. Grab a pencil, grab a pad, play squares, play tic-tac-toe, right? Make, funky chicken thing. I mean, whatever it is, right? Doodle, whatever it is you got. Count sugar packets, separate out the yellow, the blue, the white, the pink, whatever. Do whatever it is you got to do. There's so many creative things that you can do. And little kids, pre-Ks, love doing that stuff. They naturally, right? Once upon a time, and everybody knows this. It's like the kid gets this amazing, like, bop it, lights, make sounds, all that other, spends more time playing with a box of candy, right? Kids love that. They love that creativity. So you win the pre-K argument. You probably win the K argument. You probably win the first grade argument. But it's around second grade, right? Right around 8 years old that you start to lose that argument, because the kids become more demanding. There's more stuff they want. But if you've been doing that from the time that they were in pre-K, the first graders, the parents know, here's my battery of things that I can do. There's also a cohort that's going with them. And so you've got the sense of community. It's not like, Billy and Susie's parents gave them a phone and we don't have one. How come we don't have one? Because nobody got one, right? So sometimes that's the way to do it, is you start with just not allowing it to happen, right? It's not, because once you have to take it away, that's the hardest part. Because, it does make it convenient, Hey, you want mac and cheese for dinner? No, how come we can't have hamburgers? And 35 minutes goes by, your kid's like 20 feet away, right? Come on.
It's true. It's like, my funny story, my sister-in-law was telling me, they had this, my brother-in-law, I guess, has a nephew that was a terror or whatever, and, like, they went over their LAs, and my wife asked, how did that go? Was he well behaved? Oh yeah, he was great. He had his cell phone the whole, he was just playing on the phone all the time. And my wife's a nurse, she's like, you literally just like drugged your kid, or drugged the kid. Like you literally, like that's what you do to get people to to go under surgery. You drug them. And that's what happens, is like essentially what you're doing with the amount of dopamine and everything else. It's not just the apps, it's the phone itself is engineered to be addictive. And so I know I'm preaching to the choir at this point, but like.
I just think the lack of awareness for the majority of parents is there. And so I wonder, even with the smart family information, because I know we get that in the newsletters, I mean, even to put a line of, did you know? You know, because I find, I mean, just with my friends who are parents, they have no idea how damaging it is when they allow their 2-year-old to be on an iPad while driving home from the zoo because they're having a temper tantrum. That's why they're having the temper tantrum. They've already played you. So,
I mean, we refuse to go, we don't say this outright. We'll go to dinner with friends and let's bring kids, and they all pop iPads out.
yeah.
And so, like, we do that dinner, and obviously my kids included are all on screens, and then we leave, and we're like, okay, that's a family we cannot go to dinner with. Because we don't believe on iPads on the
Exactly.
table. And so if we're then I'd rather get a babysitter who's gonna play with the kids, and then we can go to dinner, than have the babysitter be the screen on the table. Like, and so it's unfortunate because it's made with really close friends have to completely change the dynamic of how we socialize because we don't see eye to eye.
Right.
It's hard. So.
And then
It
you
is.
gotta-
It's
and
a
then the
hard
other thing too is then you've got to
issue.
swim upstream,
Yeah.
right? Because your kids are like, well, they got iPads and iPads are desirable, and how come we can't help? And it's like, it's best that we never even look at that.
Well, you know, it's like we know what's our family rule. We don't do iPads at the dinner table. That's what we do. So we can't go to dinner with them. Maybe next time we'll invite them over and we'll get the babysitter to come and babysit y'all, and we can go to dinner. Oh, okay, we know it. But the kids know. I mean, but it's been going to dinners and being miserable for how many years? Because they're like spilled water, and we were supposed to have this nice family dinner at this restaurant where I wasn't supposed to cook, but here I am, like cleaning and screaming, and it's like, but all that's in the past, and now we're able to do that as a family. But you can't get there unless you did all the
do
other
the hard
parts.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Gotta lay the groundwork.
gotta make the number. Anyway.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Oh, thank y'all. Thank you.
Here's one of these cards.
Oh, yeah, I'm signed up.
Yeah, again, John Wolf, hoping you do tomorrow, but,
I tried to reach out. Is she doing okay?
Yeah, so she was gonna explain to me what was going on.
Yeah, I tried to email her a couple times and I wasn't able to,
Yeah, I'm sure I'll get the story of what happened, but she wanted to apologize.
that's okay. I just want to make sure she's all right.
Yeah, no, I think she's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if you're working with her on additional speakers.
Not quite yet. I would like to see the parent level meetings start rolling out because that's where honestly, that's where we start seeing the traction. But even at SPP, it was like small group, and then it was like a little bit bigger group.
Yeah, so get those smaller groups so that you've got a big group here. So I was going to tell you, I'm good friends with Anya Mankers, the CEO of Crime Stoppers, and you know, she's got the book and everything. She already said she'd come and do it. I cannot bring Anya here. So let's figure out
We
how.
could do something even. I just met with the Crime Stoppers, so they know about us now. So like I met with like a couple of two of their speakers, and so.
Well, and you know, she wrote the book, The Online World, and so I asked her, I was like, could you, or Crime Stoppers, and she was like, oh, I could totally do it if it works with my schedule. I'm like, well, I'd rather it be you than just a representative, so.
No, we need.
Yeah.
Let's.
I mean, she's called upon on the news every single day now with her.
We could even do it. Like we want to offer like a webinar thing too, but like we could do one of the things that we're doing in one of the schools is wanting to do is hold like a speaker.
That would be
And
fantastic.
so that would be at like St. Francis de Sales, but we'd open up for all the schools and then they could go there and maybe we can put her on the speaker panel too.
Yeah, she'd
something
be
like that.
somebody to definitely.
But yeah, we can, but yeah, once we get more, like, we can roll out these little grade level meetings.
Yeah.
And it's good, some of it might be a smaller, like harder process. For whatever reason it is here, whatever it
but
is.
believe me, I have been talking about this on the news since 2010.
No, I love it.
I mean,
Yeah.
I've been warning, and I mean, we're finally here where people
Yeah.
are kind of listening, but we're still not
it's
You
still
know?
that delusion
Yes.
of,
All those pieces.
I always use the analogy of like, if everyone, no one takes a bath, everyone's dirty, right? And you're never gonna know what clean
Ever
clean
feels
is
like.
until
Right.
you see someone else that
Like
is
you might
clean.
Right.
walk in
And
here
the
and
problem,
saw
like,
these chairs and
this
said,
is really like the modern
"Not
day,
that early,
like
but-"
I
cigarettes.
know, I always,
Listen,
no, I
Why don't we
said,
allow kids to
one
have
hundred
cigarettes?
out, I'm gonna
Because
be
it's
hopeful.
addictive.
Yeah.
It's
it's
bad
so
for their health,
funny.
but we don't have nice
Thank
little
you so
fancy.
much.
When we're at restaurants and where you
Right.
see the whole thing, like what our
That's
friend
all right.
was talking
It's
about,
raining outside.
my husband's
And we live
like,
in
don't
East-
say anything, Melissa, because I just want to be like, are advertising your child, letting them on this right now, like,
It is, and
oh my gosh, yeah.
oh my gosh, you'll love our. You would, if you ever gotten a hold of Brian Kuzma, you would just because he's so funny when he comes, like he talked like you.
Oh my gosh.
But it's real though. It's so real.
Let me, and I'm good friends with Hannah, so I'm happy to help out with
Yeah.
anything
I
on
think
the-
just rolling
the
out
leadership, 'cause
something. Yeah.
I know it does take some leadership. I'm gonna give you my card
Loves
if
to
I.
talk.
Go grab
if
me
I
one of
did.
mine too.
Okay.
So.
I know, it's a great opportunity to come out and try to help out as best as possible.
Yeah.
We gotta keep them all informed. Yeah, and sorry for messing up the St. Thomas thing. I was like, okay, it's the other St. Thomas, it's not the St. Thomas High School.
But St. Thomas High School,
Oh, yeah, that one I knew, but I went to Jackwood. It was the other St.
oh, so you were,
I was like,
oh,
I was like,
so
I
you
was
really
like,
missed that?
no, you didn't miss that much. What'd you come in on?
Just the Oasis after high school.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we did all the
You might be bringing
arguments
her on
for us.
too about, like,
And unfortunately, one of my slides disappeared somewhere.
But you have stuff on like.
Well, we,
Thanks for
our
having me.
big thing on the literacy.
Yeah, how long, are you, so you're the principal here, or how long you been
We
there?
also have programs that run to schools for the middle, elementary kids,
Okay.
teaching the story writing process and everything. But what we're finding right now is we're doing focus groups of teachers. And these are teachers who are not just language arts teachers, these are math, history, everything. We're asking them, what is
So,
your
no, it's gotta come from the parent,
every answer
right?
does that come from?
Unless, the only way it can come from you is
And
if
when
you
start
get
to
full
align
buy-in
with
from the
why
Yeah.
literacy, like, do you think
Yeah,
involved
the
in
school
that?
board would basically say,
You
if you
know, I
come
mean,
here,
there's
this
a
is what we
correlation
do.
between the two. So, I mean, they're like,
Yeah,
yes.
that's what I'm saying. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen, right? But that's the way to do it. The only way it can be come from you is if it was a policy. Right? It's the same thing. It's like, what do you mean my kid has to wear a uniform? That's kind of how we do things here.
We are.
That's what we do. We come to the school, there's a uniform that's involved.
And a lot of them-
If you don't want to wear a uniform, that's fine.
They are coming out like in
But that's what we do.
college groups now, like that are saying like, I am not getting my kid, you are the guinea pig of this, and we are not doing this to our kids.
Yeah, so we used to use community college, educational majors to be our advocates and volunteers and more like our elementary school literacy programs. These hobbies are so integral to us all, and we in college, but we can use that to teach the careers. I mean, it's individuals, they pass through, yeah, and it's super, super, so.
Yeah. Oh, it's so
I'm
incredible.
worried for my kids because of St. Thomas High School, not because of what we're doing in our house.
But that's it, though. Yeah,
But
it's,
I'm worried about the world and where it's going.
because your kids, how is your kids gonna function without, if we're all on the same
Our
page?
enrollment just went,
And that's why,
that's right. Students, kids
it's
use
weird,
9
we
cell
get some,
phones.
there's always some like weird.
It was, I want to say it was
One where I've heard there's just,
Wesleyan.
they're literally doing.
So this is a different thing, it's all about grade inflation. So, similar sort of thing. Wesleyan College
My kids are like, we're not trying to.
was looking and
Like,
basically
not trying
said,
to-
what we're gonna do is we're gonna set our average.
And like,
at
and then
A,
one, like, if it's good enough for your kids, why would it
And we're
be
gonna
good
use
for
the bell curve
someone else's? Like,
to grade
you were in a
kids
group
in
of friends
college.
already. So like, it's
Because
just, people have
years
opinions
back,
about it.
in like the eighties,
I think the more-
17% of kids would get an A.
That's just your email address. Let me send you, I think I sent you.
Now it's 43% have
I'm
an A.
over.
You can't
I'll send you
have
like
half the kids are perfect. It just doesn't make any
That has
sense.
just like.
So Wesleyan State.
Basic overview of what a grade level meeting looks like. we'll
we've got
provide,
ours,
like, we'll
so that we
refund
can
like coffee,
score,
donuts, and
right?
it just starts a
And
little
they
bit
started,
more
they
expensive,
started in
we
one
can provide
department,
slides, or we'll post
and the
it.
number of kids that dropped their major in
It
that department
goes into like a couple
in 1
testimonies,
year,
and it's just talking about the
just like
pledge,
that.
any questions.
The enrollment is
it's
hard.
and then that's it, period. It's essentially it.
Because it's like, I want these young kids.
That's hard to get great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's hard because it's addictive. So that's how I usually start out. Just from, like, it's for sure. I think that's the thing. Is that's I think that does. I lower the barriers. Sometimes we usually come out and start speaking. Is like it triggers their empathy towards you, and so there's like, oh, it's fine. So it's like a response, but.
It's not gonna be, it's not gonna be, it's not gonna be, like, to be okay with the grading, or to be okay with.
Yeah, and it's, yeah, but I think like doing that and then start
That's
rolling out
right.
those meetings,
What are you
and then
gonna
you're
do?
gonna find
But
more support.
I'm not gonna
Like, we're all gonna do
you gotta
this.
send it by,
And then you find people that
when you're
have
gonna
kids and
that's what you
they're.
got, right?
And
I'm
then
not gonna go to
you
teachers
can tell them,
and tell
like,
them
you
to
can
get
still
a retake.
take, but
Because
you
that's, like,
can take, you
what-
don't have,
if you wanna go back
like,
and
you
forth,
say,
you can do that.
now you can go